This video is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Those 3 magic words. Is it really possible to get paid to travel the world? Or is that just some kind of internet scam? In this video, I'll show you that yes, it is possible to get paid to travel, but it's also not as simple as those 3 magic words might make it seem. Hey, welcome back to Top Flight Family. My name is Carmen Sognonvi, and I'm really excited to make this video because it is actually our #1 most requested topic. In this video, I'm going to explain what it means to be a travel creator, how to make money as a travel creator, how to work with hotels, airlines, and destinations, how to get brand deals and sponsorships, what kind of camera and gear you need to get started, which social media platforms you should focus on, and which ones you shouldn't waste your energy on, how to create travel content if you don't have the time or budget to travel that often, and I'll share a 10-step plan you can follow if you're starting from scratch. To be honest, I was on the fence for a long time about whether or not to make this video, because this channel is primarily about showing parents how they can save time, reduce hassle, and maximize comfort when they travel with kids. In other words, our channel is aimed at travelers. It's not necessarily aimed at travel creators. So I don't usually get too much into the inside baseball about the travel content industry here. But on the other hand, a big part of our mission is to inspire families to travel with their children more often. And becoming a travel creator is a great way to do that. Also, there's not a lot of transparency in this industry about how everything works, how people make money, what pays, what doesn't. And as a result, it can be hard for new creators to break in, and even harder for creators of color to break in. And that's unfortunate because there's a severe lack of diversity in the travel media industry, so we definitely need new voices to join the space. I was lucky that early on, a few creators were generous enough to share with me what they knew, and that helped a lot. Now, I still did a lot of mindless bumbling around, and there was still a lot of trial and error, but it was a great jumpstart, and I'm really grateful to them for that. So consider this video to be my way of paying it forward. I hope that if you've been thinking of taking the plunge into becoming a travel creator, that this video will encourage you to give it a go and hopefully provide you with some useful tips to help you do it successfully. Okay, I'm sure some of you are wondering who I am and whether I'm even qualified to speak on this topic. So I'll run through some of my background and my track record so that you can make that decision for yourself. I began creating travel content under the brand Top Flight Family in 2016, and in 2018 I started doing this full-time for a living. My family and I specialize in luxury family travel, and we create content primarily on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. We've worked with hotel brands like Four Seasons, Ritz-Carlton, Waldorf Astoria, and Fairmont. We've worked with tourism boards like Visit California, Discover Atlanta, Quebec City Tourism. Disney is one of our most important clients. We work with them regularly across a bunch of divisions, from Disney Cruise Line to Disney Plus, to even creating content for Disney's own social media accounts, and to, of course, the parks themselves, Walt Disney World, Disneyland, and even Disneyland Paris. I was one of just 6 creators chosen by Delta Airlines to do a year-long social media ambassadorship that took us everywhere from Austin to New Orleans to Brussels to Paris. We also work with many consumer brands on sponsorships and campaigns. This year so far, we've worked with brands like Samsung and McDonald's. Last year, we also worked with Samsung and McDonald's, so they're actually repeat clients. But we also worked with Old Navy, Campbell's Soup, Mattel, Ancestry, just to name a few. Top Flight Family has been generating 6 figures of revenue every year since 2018. We're featured pretty regularly in the media, including The Washington Post, Insider, Time Out, Pop Sugar, and most recently in the May issue of American Airlines in-flight magazine, American Way. This year, our family has set a goal of visiting 21 resorts in 2021, and so far in just 5 months, we've worked with 7 resorts already, and they were all hosted stays. If you'd like to learn more about this 21 resorts project, we have a whole video about that, which I'll link below. And of course, if you'd like to follow along with us, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Everything in this video is going to draw from my personal observations and my personal experiences of being in this industry for the past 5 years. Also, my husband Serge and I were full-time entrepreneurs for almost 10 years before we even started Top Flight Family. I used to run a speaking and consulting business where I worked with colleges, nonprofits, and Fortune 500 companies. And Serge and I together started up and managed a martial arts school here in Brooklyn, New York. So I have experience on both the B2B and the B2C sides of entrepreneurship. And as a more seasoned business owner, I have a bit of a different perspective than someone who, let's say, becoming a travel creator is their first foray into entrepreneurship. Some of my opinions may be surprising to some of you, and some of them may even be considered to be somewhat controversial. If you're a creator, you may have experienced things differently than me, and because of that, you may completely disagree with some of the things that I say in this video, and that's totally fine. If that's the case, I actually encourage you to leave a comment to share your point of view, because it'll be helpful for people to hear from a range of experiences. Okay, so what is a travel creator? Well, the first thing to know is that this profession can be called different things by different people. I typically use the term travel creator, but others may say travel influencer, travel blogger, travel vlogger, travel YouTuber, travel TikToker, travel Instagrammer. The list really goes on. But the idea is that you own your own business and you make your living by creating original content for an audience that you've cultivated on social media accounts that you own. That content can be in the form of articles, photos, videos, or all of the above. The social media accounts can be on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, or a blog. The key thing is that those social media accounts are owned by you. You're not just creating content for other publications or entities. So how did the whole profession of travel creator even come to exist? Well, there's always been a demand for travel media because people want inspiration on where they can travel to, and they want information on how to make the most of their trips. But for a long time, travel content only existed within the realm of traditional media. Magazines like Travel and Leisure and Condé Nast Traveler, the travel sections of newspapers, TV shows about travel hosted by people like Samantha Brown and Rick Steves. And travel and hospitality brands knew that if they wanted to get in front of an audience of travelers, they'd have to spend big bucks on advertising in these magazines and newspapers and TV networks. Or they'd have to find a way to work with writers who got published in these outlets. But over the last 10 to 15 years, the internet has caused a huge shift in consumer behavior. Instead of spending their time consuming traditional media, people began spending more and more time on social media platforms. So suddenly, those traditional media outlets didn't have the same influence they used to have over travelers. Also, younger people who were interested in travel didn't really feel like those traditional media outlets were speaking to them in a way that was relevant, whereas they found it very compelling to see real people on social media sharing their real travels and their real travel tips. So as the importance of traditional media declined, the influence of social media soared. Travel brands realized that if they wanted to reach millennial travelers and Gen Z travelers, they had to get in front of them on social media. Part of that involved brands creating their own social media accounts and building their own audiences on those accounts, but that's a really long and laborious process, and the reality is that people like following human beings on social media, not brands. So most brand accounts aren't exactly going to be racking up millions of followers. So that's where creators come in. Travel brands realized that when they partnered with creators who already had sizable audiences, that was a much more efficient way to market on social media than focusing solely on growing their own branded accounts. Okay, let me answer the number one question that you all have. How do travel creators actually make money? The phrase, "I get paid to travel," is used widely by travel creators, and obviously I also used it in the title of this video because, let's be real, I knew that it would help get views. But in reality, as I alluded to at the top of the video, this phrase is actually a bit misleading, and there's two reasons for that. First, being paid to travel can and does happen, and I will talk about that in this video. But a lot of travel work actually doesn't pay. Doesn't matter how big or small your audience is, some types of projects just don't have a budget. Second, if you're only generating revenue from travel, then you're leaving a lot of money on the table because there are many more streams of income you could be making. Even in non-pandemic times, income from travel only accounts for about half of our revenue. In reality, being a travel creator is not that different from being any other type of creator. So let's talk about all the different ways that you can get paid. Create sponsored content. Many people call these brand deals, and they're probably the single most lucrative income stream as a creator. This is where a brand pays you to create content about their products or services. You share this content with your audience on your own social media accounts, and sometimes the brands will also use that content on their own branded social media accounts, or even use that content to run ads. Get paid by the platforms. This is the second largest source of revenue for most creators. This is when you get paid directly by the social media platforms themselves. On YouTube, once you get to 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours of watch time in the last 12 months, you can run ads on your channel, which brings in money for you. On TikTok, once you hit 100,000 followers and have at least 100,000 video views in the last 30 days, you can apply to join the TikTok Creator Fund, which is a revenue sharing program. Similarly, if you have a blog or website with high traffic, you can run ads on that. Social media platforms also sometimes have programs that are more on an invite-only basis. Like I know that at one point at least, Facebook and Instagram were both paying creators to create long-form video content in an attempt to compete with YouTube. And when they first launched Reels, Instagram was definitely paying creators to make and promote them, usually undisclosed, in an attempt to compete with TikTok. But programs like those tend to target pretty big creators. Do affiliate marketing. You can sign up to be an affiliate for various brands or retailers, and if someone buys an item using your link or your promo code, you get a small commission. For most creators, I would say this is probably a fairly small part of their revenue, and in the travel space particularly, the commissions can be laughably small. But for certain niches like tech, where they're high-cost items, or finance, where you're signing people up for credit cards, it can be lucrative. Sell merch. You can create your own branded products to sell to fans. This can be everything from t-shirts and hoodies to mugs and hats. Sell used items. This probably applies more to fashion and lifestyle creators, but many creators will sell bags, clothes, or shoes that they don't need anymore on eBay or Poshmark or Depop. Because they have a built-in audience, these items tend to sell faster or for higher prices than if they had just listed them anonymously. Create digital products. Many creators sell digital products that they've created themselves. In the travel space, the most common product is probably Lightroom presets. These are sort of like photo filters that you can use to edit photos with. But many creators are also getting into selling other types of digital products like ebooks or online courses. Lots of travel creators have courses on how to get paid to travel, for example. Sell subscriptions. Many creators will make exclusive content that's available only if you pay for it. A lot of time this is done through Patreon or YouTube memberships, and it's an ongoing monthly charge. But sometimes creators also have virtual tip jars through Cash App or Venmo, where followers can just give a one-time donation. All the revenue streams that I just mentioned apply to all creators, not just travel creators. So now let's talk about the revenue streams that exist specifically for travel creators. Organizing group trips. Some travel creators will organize group trips where their audience members can actually travel with them. Now, as a viewer, please be cautious about these types of trips because unfortunately there are some scammers out there. You should always be able to pay using a major credit card so that you have purchase protection. So if the creator is asking you to pay via Cash App or Zelle or Venmo, consider that to be a red flag. Also, the trip should always be affiliated with an actual travel agency in addition to the creator themselves. So just be aware. Sell your photography or videography services. There are many travel creators who are skilled photographers or videographers, and they will sell their services to travel brands, hotels, destinations, or even Airbnb owners. Some of them started out as professional photographers or videographers and they just happened to start traveling, and others started traveling but they developed photography and videography skills over time as a creator. So for example, let's say a hotel has a need for some new imagery for their website or for ad campaigns or for their social media channels. They'll hire someone to shoot photos and videos for them, and they'll cover that person's travel expenses. The photographer or videographer will not actually be in the images, and they will not be expected to post these images on their social media channels. They're essentially just a camera for hire. The hotel will own these images and use them for their own purposes. Become a travel agent. Many travel creators end up becoming licensed travel agents. They do this because they get a small discount when they book their own travel, and also they can earn commissions by booking trips for their followers. Consult with travel brands. Some travel creators will be paid by travel brands to advise them on specific areas like how to improve their social media or how to market more effectively to specific types of travelers like Black travelers or LGBTQ travelers. Get paid to post travel content. Finally, we get to the actual pay to travel part. For certain types of projects, travel brands, hotels, or destinations will invite a creator on a trip and pay them to create content and share it on their social media accounts. I'll talk more about that shortly. But if you've been keeping count, I've now listed 12 different revenue streams that are available to travel creators, and only one out of those 12 is actually about getting paid to travel. So again, if you're only generating revenue from the travel part itself, you're leaving a lot of money on the table. So what types of travel projects pay and which ones don't? I'm going to explain that next, but before I do, I want to emphasize how important it is to travel safely, especially if you're a travel creator. Here are a few things you can do to keep you and your family safe on your next trip. First, if you're going to stay at a hotel or resort, consider arranging your airport transfer through your hotel instead of getting a ride with some random driver once you land. It may cost a little more, but you're likely to have a much cleaner and safer ride. Second, avoid conspicuous displays of wealth. This seems like common sense, but you'd be surprised by how many travelers make themselves easy targets for theft by flaunting cash or jewelry or head-to-toe designer logo outfits. Keeping a low profile is always going to be safer than being flashy. Third, be careful about using public Wi-Fi networks. If a hacker connects to the same unencrypted Wi-Fi network, they could steal your personal information. Even if they only have a basic knowledge of computers, they could get to your passwords, your financial details, even your emails. That's why it's really important to use a VPN when you travel, so that you keep your personal information safe. We've been using ExpressVPN for years now, and I always recommend it to everyone. ExpressVPN encrypts your internet connection using the highest standards of encryption currently available. It would take a hacker with a supercomputer billions of years to crack. Go to expressvpn.com/topflightfamily and find out how you can get 3 months free. So when it comes to travel content, which kinds of projects pay and which ones don't? Well, the biggest category of paid travel probably comes from DMOs, or destination marketing organizations. DMO is an umbrella term that refers to all the organizations that are in charge of driving travel and tourism to a specific destination. If it's for a country or state, it's often called a tourism board or a tourism authority. If it's for a specific town or city, in the US, that's often known as a CVB, or Convention and Visitors Bureau. For the sake of simplicity in this video, I'll just use the term tourism board to refer to all of these, just because that term is more familiar to most people. Tourism boards will often invite travel creators to come and experience their destination. They'll put together a whole itinerary that highlights different attractions and experiences, and the tourism board will make all of the arrangements. All the expenses of the trip will be covered by the tourism board, and on top of that, they will also pay the creator a fee in exchange for the creator publishing a specific set of content deliverables on their social media platforms. Now, all that said, many tourism boards do have a budget to pay creators, but many of them do not. Some tourism boards will only cover the costs associated with hosting the trip, but they won't actually pay a fee. And some tourism boards may only cover part of the trip's expenses. So for example, some may expect a creator to cover their own airfare to get to the destination, but once they're there, the tourism board will cover everything else. Or sometimes they'll only cover costs for the main creator, but not for their photographer or significant other or family members. And sometimes, tourism boards will allocate their paid budget towards certain more prominent creators with larger audiences. But when it comes to working with creators with smaller audiences, they won't pay anything. It's really all over the place, and it really just depends on the internal dynamics of that particular tourism board. Some tourism boards will also just add travel creators to existing group press trips. These trips are primarily designed for traditional travel writers. Tourism boards host these writers for free in hopes that the writer will be able to get their article about the destination published in a traditional media outlet, like the travel section of a newspaper or an in-flight magazine. And sometimes, instead of creating an experience just for the travel creator, they'll just add creators to those existing press trips. Now, I've been on a couple of these types of group press trips, and honestly, I don't think it's a very effective PR practice. Because travel writers and travel creators have very different needs when it comes to doing their jobs, and it's almost impossible for one trip to meet the needs of both. Also, some traditional travel writers have a strong sense of animosity towards creators because, frankly, they think we're just a bunch of shallow narcissists who do nothing but take selfies everywhere we go. So hosting these two very different groups of professionals together on one trip can cause tension, and it's just not a great strategy. Also, believe it or not, there are still some segments of the travel and hospitality industry that just do not understand influencer marketing at all. Once I was at a travel conference and I met a woman, let's call her Eleanor, and she was representing the tourism board of a very wealthy, very popular resort town in California. Eleanor was essentially a one-woman PR agency that the tourism board had hired to handle their PR efforts. She was really excited about working with us because our audience was such a great fit for the town, and she said she wanted to arrange a trip for us ASAP. So when I got back home, I put together a proposal for her with a few different content packages and fees, and I emailed it over. When she got it, Eleanor called me up and she was like, "I don't understand. Why are you charging money?" So not only did Eleanor have no clue that it's standard practice for travel creators to get paid for trips like this, but she literally thought I was trying to scam her. Like, as I was talking to her, I realized that she actually didn't believe that influencers getting paid was even a thing. And she thought I was pretending it was a thing so that I could scam her for money. It was one of the most awkward professional situations I've ever been in, because the only way for me to defend myself was to essentially tell her that she was clueless about her own industry of travel PR. So I share that story to let you know that you should expect to run into a couple of Eleanors during your career as a travel creator. Unfortunately, some PR people still only know how to work with traditional media, and they just haven't kept up with how media has evolved. So what about working with hotels and resorts? Well, I can tell you straight up that a lot of hotel projects just don't pay. If it's a standard partnership or collab where the hotel is comping the creator for a certain number of nights and in exchange that creator publishes a specific set of content deliverables, that's called a hosted stay, and it often doesn't pay. It's just done on a trade or barter basis. Now, our family has done many paid projects with hotels over the years, but these are usually not just your standard collabs. There's almost always more involved, which is why there's a budget associated with them. I'll give you a few examples. If a hotel is looking to have very extensive usage rights of your images, that would involve a budget. Let me explain. For unpaid projects, we'll typically allow the hotel to repost our photos on their organic social media channels for up to 6 months. But if they want to use the images for anything else, like to run ads or to put it on a billboard or to publish in their marketing materials, they'll pay for those usage rights. So hosted stays that involve extensive usage rights will be paid projects. We've also done many projects where there's a budget because the parent company is doing a big marketing push across all their brands. For example, let's say a big hotel group like IHG or Hilton or Marriott does an annual sale across their whole portfolio of hotel brands. They might run an influencer campaign where they hire creators to stay at each of their hotel brands, create content there, and all the posts are pushing this big annual sale. Since it's a corporate level marketing push, that would have a budget. We've also done many paid projects where we're the talent. So let's say a hotel needs to shoot some new photos or videos for marketing purposes. Instead of hiring a traditional model to be in those photos and videos, sometimes hotels will hire creators or influencers instead. The creator doesn't actually have to create the content because the hotel would just hire their own photographer or videographer to capture it. The creator is literally being paid to be in the images, basically to be the model or actor on screen. Sometimes these types of projects will also mix in some content creation or posting on the creator's own channels, but it's mainly the on-camera talent portion that makes it a paid project. When it comes to airlines, cruise lines, and other types of travel brands, it's very similar to hotels and resorts. There are a lot of unpaid opportunities where your travel is comped, and there are some paid projects, but those tend to involve very specific initiatives that have a budget behind them. So as you can see, it's definitely possible to get paid to travel, but expect to put in at least a couple of years of work before you start seeing some of those paid opportunities. The reality is that a lot of work in the travel industry still happens on an unpaid or barter basis, so you should be aware of that. Later in this video, I'll share some tips on how you can reach out to hotels and destinations to set up partnerships and collabs, so stay tuned. So what makes for a good travel creator? What are the elements that separate the average travel creator from the exceptional travel creator? Well, in my opinion, a travel creator has 3 main roles: to inspire, to inform, and to entertain. In order to fulfill those roles, travel creators need to have 3 main elements in their content: aesthetics, information, and storytelling. And when I say storytelling, that doesn't mean that every piece of content has to tell a literal story with like plot and a character arc and conflict and resolution. Though of course, if it does, that's awesome. I'm using storytelling here as more of a catch-all term for giving the content humanity, for showcasing your personality, your sense of humor, being vulnerable, sharing funny behind-the-scenes moments, things like that. Think of it as a 3-legged stool. If one leg is a lot longer than the others, things will feel off balance. But if all 3 legs are even, the stool feels solid. In my opinion, the best travel creators are those who are good at all 3 things: aesthetics, information, and storytelling. If I were to do an honest assessment of our own YouTube and Instagram content, I would say that we do pretty okay on the aesthetics. I'm not the world's best photographer or videographer by any means, but I think we do a reasonably good job of presenting the places we travel to in a visually appealing way. When it comes to information, we're very strong. I can confidently say that this is one of our biggest strengths. And storytelling is probably the area where we could use the most improvement, frankly. It gets a little bit better with every trip, but our storytelling definitely could use some work. So if you're already a creator, this could be a good exercise for you to do. Take stock of your content across all of the platforms and see how you're doing in each of these areas. How can you make your content better? The biggest problem I see with a lot of content creators is not that their content is bad, it's that they haven't quite figured out exactly why people should follow them. So if you're going to become a travel creator, one of the first and most important things you can do is figure out what makes you different. And there's two parts to this. First, figure out what your niche is within travel. For example, our niche is luxury family travel, but yours might be adventure travel, or solo female travel, or foodie travel. And when you do this, be honest with yourself and what you actually enjoy most when traveling. For example, don't pick van life just because it's trending right now, when in reality, you don't even like road trips that much. Or don't pick luxury travel just because you think it's more prestigious, when in reality, you would much rather stay in a unique Airbnb than a fancy hotel. People can tell when you're faking it, so pick something that you genuinely enjoy, and that's going to make your content much more authentic and compelling. But picking a niche isn't enough. You also want to think about what it is that you're bringing to this niche. What's your unique point of view? For example, we're not the only creators to focus on luxury family travel. But even if we're visiting a destination that another luxury family creator has just been to, our content is going to be totally different from theirs. Because our approach to travel is going to be influenced by our family's unique background. The fact that both Serge and I are people of color, that we're a multiracial and multicultural family with roots on 4 different continents, that our families come from countries that have been heavily shaped by colonialism, that I'm an immigrant and Serge is first generation, that I'm a multiracial Asian woman who is now raising Black and multiracial kids, that I grew up in Hong Kong and Serge was born and raised in New York City, and now we're raising our kids in New York too. Those are all elements that give us a very specific point of view when we visit a place. We're going to notice things or be particularly interested in things that others might not be. So think about how this applies to you. Let's say your niche is adventure travel. What's the unique perspective or contribution that you're bringing to this topic? What do you think is missing from the conversation around adventure travel? What types of people or experiences or destinations are underrepresented, and how can you do something about that in your content? Once you nail your niche and your point of view, that's going to help make your content much more specific and unique. So how do you actually get started if you want to become a travel creator? Here's the 10-step plan that I recommend you follow. Number 1, decide on your niche and point of view. Number 2, decide which social media platforms you'll focus on. Number 3, start creating content about the trips you're already doing. Number 4, mix in content about your hometown or home state. Number 5, pitch for comped day tours or attractions. Number 6, start creating sponsored content with affiliate campaigns and gifted items. Number 7, pitch for hotels and resort stays. Number 8, apply for sponsored campaigns through influencer dashboards. Number 9, introduce yourself to tourism boards. Number 10, introduce yourself to brands. Okay, let me break down each of these in detail. Number 1, decide on your niche and point of view. This is what I talked about in the previous section. What's your niche within travel? Is it luxury travel, adventure travel, RV travel? And what's the unique perspective you'll be bringing to that niche? Decide on that to begin with, but also understand that that may evolve over time, and that's okay. Number 2, decide which social media platforms you'll focus on. There are so many social media platforms out there, but you don't have unlimited amounts of time. So how do you pick which ones to focus on? Ultimately, you're gonna have to decide that for yourself, but here is my completely unsolicited opinion. If you carved up your time and attention, I would put 50% toward TikTok and 25% each towards YouTube and Instagram. Let me explain why. If you're going to pick one primary social media platform to focus on right now, I believe it should be TikTok. Now, organic growth on TikTok isn't as strong as it was in 2020, but it's still a platform where growth is very attainable. There's also not a ton of travel creators on the platform yet, so you have a real chance of standing out. And while some brands are still hesitant about TikTok, I'm starting to see a lot of sponsorship dollars move over there from Instagram, now that the silly Trump ban has been lifted. Also, you're starting to see airlines and hotel brands and tourism boards starting up their own TikTok accounts. So this is a really good time to make a mark there. If you want a deep dive on travel content and TikTok, I actually co-wrote a whole white paper on this, which you can download for free at tiktokfortravelbrands.com. The next most important social media platform is YouTube. Now, understand that YouTube is a grind. Making videos is much more time consuming than taking and editing photos by a factor of like 10x or 20x. Also, it can take a long time to grow and develop an audience on YouTube, so the sooner you start, the better. I mean, we uploaded close to 100 videos before we had one that popped in a big way and our channel finally started growing. But once you finally do hit the algorithm and you see some traction, you can generate really good passive income from running ads, so it's very worthwhile. Also, remember that YouTube is the second largest search engine behind Google. And more travelers are turning to YouTube to research trips instead of blogs, and I'm gonna explain why in a moment. So if you don't have a presence on YouTube, you're really missing out. Only after TikTok and YouTube would come Instagram, in my opinion. This may surprise some of you because Instagram is so dominant, and it's true, most of the big sponsorship bucks right now are still allocated towards Instagram. And travel brands love Instagram more than any other platform right now, so you should definitely be on there. But I also think that this is the beginning of the end for Instagram. It's not totally dead yet, but those days are not as far away as some people might think. Organic growth is next to impossible these days on Instagram, which makes it very off-putting to new creators and small businesses. Also, Instagram has dominated social media for so long that I think most people are just ready for a change. The reason TikTok made such a big splash is because the lack of polish and the authenticity you saw there was so refreshing when compared to Instagram, which is much more of a kind of controlled, curated look. And I know that Instagram is pushing Reels really hard right now, and some creators are seeing results with that, but let's be real. When have you ever heard an end user of Instagram, not a creator, an end user, say, wow, you know what I just can't get enough of? Instagram Reels. Like, nobody has ever said that. Instead, what I hear most often is, how do I get these Reels off my home feed? They're the worst. Creators are happy about Reels because, of course, they're finally seeing a little bit of reach on Instagram after a long period of stagnation. But in my opinion, that's more because Instagram is forcing Reels onto all of our feeds rather than any of us proactively seeking to watch any Reels. Also, Reels just don't have the same longevity as TikToks do. I mean, I have TikToks that are continuing to get views and followers 6 to 12 months later, and it's this possibility for delayed explosions that makes the platform really rewarding as a creator. Whereas many Reels still seem to have like a 24 to 48 hour shelf life, the same way as in-feed posts do. Also, and I'm really sorry if this offends anyone, but if you're an avid TikTok user, it's hard to watch a Reel and not feel secondhand embarrassment. Like, every Reel that shows up on my feed is always some trend that the rest of us on TikTok stopped doing 6 months ago. So all that to say, I am not convinced that Reels is going to save Instagram from eventual extinction. And that's why I think you should be on there, but I wouldn't invest too much of your time in trying to grow. Now, let's talk about blogs. This may be controversial, but in my opinion, blogs are a completely dead medium. But many travel brands still like seeing long-form text content in addition to social media imagery, so I recommend still having a blog because it's going to help you land partnerships. But think of it more as a box to check, and don't put too much time and energy into trying to grow traffic, and here's why. Once all of these VC-funded digital media brands like BuzzFeed and Vox and Refinery29 started pumping out hundreds of articles, not per month or per week, but per day, it became really hard for independent blogs to compete in terms of SEO, or search engine optimization. Also, just about every blog these days is completely bloated with ads to the point where you can barely read the article, which makes the user experience absolutely horrendous. And because so many bloggers were hustling hard to compete with the volume of content that these huge digital media brands were generating, a whole cottage industry of pre-written blog content for sale has popped up. So nowadays, a lot of blogs are filled with really poorly written articles that the blogger bought from some virtual assistant for $5 a pop, which means that often, the quality of information you find in blogs these days is god-awful. 9 times out of 10 when I'm researching a destination or a property, the information I find on blogs is terrible, whereas the information I find on YouTube is excellent. So I think we're going to see a big shift in the way people research their travel, and YouTube and video content is actually going to outstrip text content. Now, I used to run a blog about the intersection of race and pop culture, and I was actually part of the first wave of OG bloggers back in like the mid-2000s, and I even spoke at the second ever Blog Her conference. So it's not like I have some aversion to blogs as a medium. But having been part of blogging back then and seeing how things are now, I kind of have a bird's eye view of how much the landscape has shifted. Let's talk about Twitter, Facebook, and Pinterest. In my opinion, these platforms are purely optional. We do have accounts on each, but honestly, they have no value whatsoever in terms of sponsorship dollars. We basically just use them to post links to our new blog posts and videos, so that can be a nice value add to a package of content you're doing for a travel brand, but really, brands don't care that much these days about these platforms. Now, when it comes to Snapchat, if you really love the platform and you actually feel that a good amount of your audience is on there, great. But I would say that travel brands don't care much about it, and I really think that sponsorship dollars have also dried up a lot for Snapchat. I do know that Snapchat has started some kind of a creator fund, and there are some creators totally killing it, making big bucks there, but I think that as a travel creator, Snapchat shouldn't be a top priority for you. Now let's talk about Clubhouse. Again, if you really love the app, then do your thing. But having spent a significant amount of time on there, to me, Clubhouse feels more like a B2B play. For example, I see a lot of travel creators on there hustling online courses to other aspiring travel creators, but I don't see a lot of actual travelers on there looking for information and tips. So I wouldn't spend too much time on Clubhouse unless your primary source of revenue is selling courses to other creators. Let's talk about podcasts. Now, I was also an OG podcaster. I actually had a podcast all the way back in 2005, back when Apple had just added the podcast section to iTunes, and it was literally just an alphabetical list because that's how few podcasts there were back then. So it's been fun for me to see that there's a bit of a renaissance right now in terms of podcasting. Now, I do think that this is a good growth area later on in your career as a creator, and Serge and I are actually considering starting a podcast at some point, but I definitely wouldn't focus on this in the beginning. Number 3. Start creating content about the trips you're already doing. There's no real shortcut to becoming a travel creator. You can't just jump from doing no traveling to suddenly getting all of your trips paid for. It just doesn't work that way. You have to start by creating content about the trips that you're already doing on your own and that you're paying for on your own. You have to build a sizable audience, and only then will brands be interested in working with you. Now, a quick note about camera gear before we continue. If you already have a DSLR or mirrorless camera, that's great. Use it and keep getting better at using it. But if you don't already own a real camera, don't rush out to buy one. Instead, start by shooting all your content on a recent iPhone or Samsung smartphone. We actually shoot just about all our videos and photos on an iPhone, and I always upgrade to the newest one each year. But any phone that was released in the last 3 years or so has an excellent camera. Technique is much more important than gear, believe it or not. So start with a smartphone and just teach yourself how to get the best possible photos and videos that you can from the equipment you already have before you move on to investing into more expensive equipment. Now, we have a few older videos on our channel that can help you take better photos, how to get better vacation photos with your iPhone, 25 travel photography tips for non-photographers, photographing children when they don't feel like smiling for the camera. I'll link all of these below, but of course there are so many great tutorials here on YouTube about all this stuff. Now, when you do decide to invest in some gear, and if you're doing video content, I would actually recommend that you first invest in a microphone before a camera, because improving your audio is really important. Right now, I'm using a Tascam DR10L digital audio recorder and lav mic, and that's my main go-to. But another option is the Instamic, which you've probably seen in some of our other videos. With both of these though, you'll need to sync the audio track with your video, but that's really easy to do in your editing software. Okay, so back to creating content about trips you're already doing. One thing to keep in mind is that you can be a travel creator without having to do a huge volume of traveling. Yes, our family is visiting 21 resorts in 2021, but we didn't start out at this frequency, and you don't have to either, nor do you ever have to. I think many people think that one trip equals one vlog or just a handful of photos, so in order to have content, you have to keep traveling more and more and more. But vlogs or reviews or trip recaps are not the only kind of content you can make. You can make top 5 lists or top 10 lists, like my top 10 favorite destinations for street food, or the 5 best cities to visit when you're in your 20s. You can share travel tips or travel hacks. You can do versus videos, like flying versus road trips, which is better? Beach vacations versus city vacations, which one should you do? You can do room tours or resort tours. You can share your favorite travel gear or your favorite travel gadgets. You can do Q&As where you just answer a bunch of questions from your audience. You can do how-to tutorials, like how to travel for cheap, how to pack light. You can do opinion or analysis pieces, like why luxury hotels are overrated, or the history of premium economy cabins. And all of these formats I mentioned can be done in the form of a YouTube video, as a TikTok, as an Instagram caption that's like a mini blog post. So don't assume that just because you don't have the time or budget to take a trip every other week, you can't be a travel creator. But on every trip that you do make sure that you're capturing way more photos and video than you think you might need, both horizontal video for YouTube and vertical video for TikTok and Instagram stories. That way you have lots of extra B-roll that you can integrate into future YouTube videos or TikToks. Number 4. Mix in content about your hometown or home state. Many of us tend to take our hometowns or our home states for granted, but keep in mind that where you live could be somebody else's dream destination. Now, even if you live in a small town in a suburb, chances are there's a city or a mountain or a lake that's driving distance from you that is a tourist destination. So remember that you don't always have to hop on a plane to create travel content. Build up a library of content about your hometown or your home state because there will be travelers out there looking for this information. Number 5. pitch for comped day tours or attractions. So once you've built up a decent library of travel content and you've started building an audience, it's time to practice pitching or reaching out to potential partners. One good place to start is something that's fairly low cost, like tickets to a local museum or a 1-hour walking tour. Send them an email to introduce who you are, what type of travel you specialize in, who your audience is, and why they should work with you. Let them know that if they're interested in partnering with you, you can offer them X amount of content deliverables. Let's say a YouTube video or an Instagram post or a TikTok or a combination of the above, reviewing the experience in exchange for comp tickets. You're bound to get some no's, but eventually someone will say yes, and then you've just landed your first partnership. Number 6. Start creating sponsored content with affiliate campaigns and gifted items. As I mentioned, sponsored content or brand deals are the most lucrative type of revenue, so you should start on the path as soon as you can. But it's hard to ask a brand to pay you to create sponsored content if you've never actually done any sponsored content before, so they have no samples to look at. That's why I always recommend that creators start practicing how to make sponsored content as soon as possible. Because believe it or not, it's not that easy to make sponsored content that conveys information about the product or service, but is also interesting or visually appealing to your audience. A good way to start is by reaching out to some brands that you like to see if they're willing to gift you items in exchange for a social media post. Honestly, getting free stuff is extremely easy. It's getting paid that's the harder part. You can also join the affiliate program for a brand or retailer and create sponsored posts that way. Over time, you build up a nice portfolio of samples to show potential brand partners, plus you also get your audience used to the fact that, hey, you can expect to see a few sponsored posts here and there when you follow me. Just make sure that you make the appropriate disclosures like #ad or #sponsored, #gifted, #partner. It's a good idea to ask the brand what their preference is. Number 7. Pitch for hotels and resort stays. Once you've been able to land a couple of partnerships with tours or attractions, it's time to start reaching out to some hotels and resorts. Getting comped or discounted stays at hotels and resorts is actually not as hard as you might think. Most hotels will have a page on their website that's a media room or a press room. You want to find the contact information for the person who handles their PR or public relations or communications. Email that person, and the process is basically the same as reaching out to tour companies and attractions, but just include the dates that you're looking for. And please don't be like, oh, my birthday is coming up, can you give me a free room? Always phrase it in terms of what value the hotel can get out of working with you and reaching your audience. Nobody cares about your birthday or your anniversary. Number 8. Apply for sponsored campaigns through influencer dashboards. Once you've built up a little library of sample sponsored posts, it's time to start getting paid. When you're first starting out, the easiest way to start getting paid brand deals is applying for campaigns on influencer dashboards. These are companies that create and manage influencer marketing campaigns for brands, but rather than doing it in a more hands-on way, how more full-service agencies would do it, influencer dashboards use kind of a semi-automated process where they have influencers apply to be part of their influencer database, and then they post campaign opportunities to this database of influencers and give them a chance to apply for them. Now, these campaigns tend to have very low pay, but they are usually for big, reputable brands, so it's a good way to get your foot in the door and get some practice and kind of build that portfolio. Just don't stay in this world for too long. I don't really work with dashboards at all these days, so I'm not that up to date with this side of the marketplace, but here are some of the companies that I used to work with back in my early days as a creator. Number 9. Introduce yourself to tourism boards. Once you've been able to land a few partnerships with tours and attractions, as well as a few hotels and resorts, it's time to start reaching out to tourism boards. Different creators will have different strategies when it comes to this, but I think that with outreach, the goal should be less about pitching them a specific trip and more about just getting on their radar. So I'd recommend going to the tourism board website, looking for their press room or media room page and finding the right contact, and then sending an email where you're basically introducing yourself and what you're about and telling them what partners you've already worked with. And basically say something along the lines of, I'd love to be considered for any suitable influencer activations you may have down the line. Or if you're open to joining existing group press trips, you can also say, I'd love to be considered for any suitable press trips you have coming up. Even if they don't have anything right now that's a fit, they may reach out to you when they do have something that's a fit for the niche that you're in. Also, don't be afraid to check in again a few times a year and give them an update on some of the things that you've done lately. You don't want to be a pest, but you do want to stay on their radar. Number 10. Introduce yourself to brands. Once you've landed some paid campaigns through the influencer dashboards, it's time to start reaching out directly to brands. Just as with tourism boards, I think the best approach is for you to get on their radar as opposed to pitching something specific. Because the way sponsored content works is that the brand usually already has a specific campaign that they're launching, and they're looking for creators to add onto that campaign. It's not really the norm that they'll just randomly want to do your idea with just you. So the goal is for them to keep you in mind for their next campaign as opposed to you landing a paid project right away. So again, you'll have to do some research to find out who the right contact is. Usually a good place to start is to Google the name of the brand and media contact. So for example, Neutrogena media contact, Adidas media contact. Since influencer marketing, even for paid projects, often falls under PR. You can also see if you can find press releases from that company because they'll often list a media contact there. Now, trying to find the right contact person is often the hardest part of any of this type of outreach. So just be persistent and expect that you won't always get the right person right away. Now, if you're going to become a creator of any kind and start working with brands, it's really important that you stay on the right side of the law. So always make sure that you're making the proper disclosures. If you got paid a fee or commission to post something, or if you got something for free in exchange for posting about it, you have to disclose that to your audience. That's not just a courtesy, that's according to the guidelines that the FTC or the Federal Trade Commission has in place for creators and influencers. If it's a paid campaign, the brand will usually tell you exactly how they want you to do the disclosure. It'll usually be #ad or #sponsored, and it needs to be conspicuous. So for an Instagram in-feed post, for example, it should appear before the more link in the caption. Don't just bury it in a bunch of hashtags at the end. For comped travel, the FTC guidelines aren't as specific, but the basic idea is that you need to let your audience know that you got it for free. So we'll often disclose that in a full sentence, like, thanks to so-and-so for hosting us, and we usually also add #hosted. Now, different creators do it different ways, but the idea is you want to be as transparent as possible. I find that unfortunately, many creators, especially larger ones for some reason, really play fast and loose with their disclosures. They probably don't make clear disclosures because they think that not including those will make them seem more quote-unquote authentic to their audience, as if these are trips that they just happen to take on their own instead of travel that they're being paid to do or getting for free. My take is that apart from the legality of it, you also have a responsibility to your audience to be upfront and honest. If you got to travel for free or if you got paid for something, your audience should know that. Now, that doesn't mean that your audience is going to automatically dismiss your content. They can still get valuable insight into a hotel or a destination from your content, even if you have a commercial relationship with that hotel or destination. But your audience has a right to know what that relationship is so that they can make their own determinations as how to interpret your content. There was a lot more information that I couldn't fit into this video because it was already so long, but I'll probably be doing at least 1 or 2 follow-ups to this video, so if you have any questions, leave them below, and I'll try to make sure I answer them in the next one. Okay, if you'd like to find out why we're visiting 21 resorts in 2021, just click that video right there. If you haven't already, please subscribe and turn on notifications, and follow us on TikTok and Instagram at Top Flight Family. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.